think we're live.
Uh-oh.
Well, welcome, uh, anyone, to our brand new podcast, The More You Roll, where we talk about 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons while our dog makes noises in the corner of the room.
It's support. It's how he shows his support.
Let's see here. Well, we have some topics to go over today. This is a informal podcast. We don't have a script to go along. We just kind of have some general topics. Also, a little bit of a disclaimer. These are our personal opinions. We aren't trying to tell anyone how to play the game. We just want to express some of our own personal opinions about it, have some conversations about certain topics, and then maybe things that us as a player and a DM maybe prefer as players.
Yeah, especially because I am relatively new, and I say relatively, I should just say brand spanking new to D&D. Overall, I have only played for a couple of months now. So, of course, some of the questions or thoughts or other things that I might have hopefully reflect some of the same ones that new players might have as well. And of course, you can always comment on the page, text us, put something on there, let us know of some topics that you want to hear about, because then we can go ahead and research them. Some of us have to do more homework than others to be prepared.
Yeah,
so
we have plenty of source material around us. I have chat in front of me, so feel free to, this is somewhat interactive. Feel free to make a comment, and please call me out if my rules are wrong.
This is the time to argue with the DM.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yes.
Yes.
The DM does not remember anything from these conversations. So you want to just go into the first topic?
Yeah, so we kind of thought, for this first introductory episode, one of the things that comes up a lot when we start playing these new games, we've got a pickup game going, we've got a couple long-standing ones going, one-shots with friends, all those kind of things. One of the first questions that comes up is about building a character. Mm-hmm. And so, of course, there's the, what race, what class, things like that, but aside from those, which are very important, I'm not dismissing them, but aside from those things, kind of that very first step that you want to do when you're building a character is ask yourself, who am I? How do I fit into the narrative of the story and of the world that's built, before you layer in the race and class stuff?
Yep.
So I think that's a good place for us to start talking about today.
Yeah. As a DM, I really encourage my players to build a backstory, to kind of pull from for inspiration as a character. Certain aspects or certain little nuances that their characters have, that's where that comes from. So the depth of the backstory, however, can vary greatly depending on the campaign. If you're doing a one-shot, right, you don't want to go into this massive 3-page story backstory where you talk all the way about from when you were 5 years old and your family was murdered, and because that's not going to come into play.
Unless you're Inigo Montoya in The Princess Bride and you tell literally everyone you meet that you were looking for the person who killed your father.
Now you must die.
Now I want to play that character.
Yeah, so where, simple things that you would start off on, where you came from, where you grew up, your profession, how your profession grew into the class that you are now. For instance, you could have been in a family of musicians, and that's kind of how you became to be a bard, or you were raised in a temple and now you're a cleric or a paladin.
And the reason, to me at least, that backstory part is so important is because, let's take a rogue, for example. When you say rogue, a lot of people think thief, assassin, those basic quick think terms. But how you choose to play your character and how you choose to build it out should be derived from what your character kind of is all about. For example, in a campaign that we're doing, I am a cat pirate captain, which is, the swashbuckler is a certain type of rogue. But going into it, I knew that I wanted to have more than sailing. I didn't want to be a straight up criminal. I kind of wanted something that was going to fall in a piratey area. And so I built an entire backstory that was derived around my ship. It's a relatively short backstory just because it's a kind of a shorter depth campaign compared to most. It's kind of a series of one shots. But by thinking about where I wanted my character to come from as a pirate versus a sailor versus a criminal definitely affected the kind of backstory that I put together. I mean, everything I do is about trying to get back to my ship.
Right. Which is great because that gives you inspiration for little nuances that your character has done. And it gives you a goal, right? So in addition to whatever the DM has set up for the entire campaign, you can also create your own side goals, and that's a conversation you can have with your DM as well, and say, in addition to whatever you have planned, this is my motivation for going along with your story. The end goal is, it may be selfish, but I need to get back to my ship. I need to get back to my temple. I need to do X, Y, Z. And 9 times out of 10, a DM would allow that to happen, make it happen eventually.
And it does allow me, when we're exploring a cave or something similar, and we come, I'm on my own for a minute. I went to go check something out, and I find a large pile of gold. I'm saving up to try to re-get my ship. I won't go into too many details, but because there might be players watching this. But in general, there's a big ship kind of element motivating me, so I'm going to go ahead and, take extra gold that I might not tell them I have, and then share the rest out or whatever it is. That's not because I'm a quote unquote bad person or I'm a thief. It is specifically linked to my backstory of trying to get the ship back.
Yep. And then on the opposite end of that, you kind of also have to limit yourself, because it's very easy for your backstory to kind of get out of hand as far as the table is concerned. From the DM standpoint, you want to continue the story moving, and in order to do that, and I've heard it said multiple ways, but the one I like the most is, it's like herding cats. Everyone has their own backstories, everyone has their own motivations, everyone wants to do their own thing. At this specific moment, everyone is on the same path to accomplish one goal. So you don't want your backstory to detract from that goal. You want it to add flair while you are getting to the goal.
You don't want to basically take focus or shift the campaign or be, that guy or whatever in the party. I mean, it's not meant... There's kind of two parts to that. It's not meant that your backstory should override whatever's happening. It's that, if, for example, if you're an actor and you are looking into, portraying a specific character, you're going to do a little more research into why that character may act the way that they are, that no one else in your cast is going to have to do or going to think about, but you're really going to think about. It's kind of the same way, because it informs a lot of the smaller decisions that people may not even realize are happening. But it adds an entire subtext and layer to the game, that the role-playing and other things, that's kind of the point of D&D. If you were just going to sit down and play a pre-structured board game, you'd do that. So part of what makes D&D so much fun, of course, is the role-playing part of it, and your backstory is going to inform a lot of those interactions and the role-playing that you have with the other characters as well.
Right. Yeah. You walk a fine line when you have destructive tendencies, or if you're in evil alignment. That's not something I would recommend for a new player, because
the evil alignment,
okay. Especially if you're not in an evil campaign. It is very difficult to keep a party together when their morals do not line up.
Right.
And that is a conversation you can have with the DM, wherein either, just because you're evil does not mean you're malicious. For instance, you take that off the table. Yeah. For instance, you can, let's see here. I'm trying to think of a specific, because I do play an evil character in one of my campaigns, but I see evil more like selfish. He's lawful evil, so he belongs to a criminal organization, he is extremely loyal to that organization to the point where it is a little polarizing to the rest of the party. However, he does not let that get in the way of the party's goal because they share the same goal.
Yeah.
It's just he might take a different path to get there.
And that's kind of how the backstory plays into it is, it's not, D&D is not one of those games that's A to B. There's 1,000 different ways to get from A to B, which usually you go from like J to L to Z, whatever you want to do. But effectively, part of the fun is really thinking about that backstory. But on that note, this is one of my actual pet peeves. Especially for newer players. I mean, I made this mistake when I first started playing because one of the first things you do when you sit down is the DM's going to go, so, you've joined the rest of your party. They might describe the scenario in which you walk in and they go, describe what they see. That's a key thing there. Describe what they see. So they're not going to see that you're 35. They're going to see that you're middle-aged from what they can tell, or that you don't have a lot of wrinkles, or you do have a lot of wrinkles, or whatever it is. They're going to see that your armor is well taken care of or not. They're going to see what you're wearing, what you're not wearing. I mean, all of those little things, that's what they see. Your backstory is supposed to be yours. Just like when you meet a new person in real life, unless you're Inigo Montoya telling everyone that you're after the person who killed his father, you probably don't just spill your guts to everybody. And so that's kind of one of those more exciting parts, is that you have these secrets, you have this kind of influence behind you that is affecting how you play the game. In one of my campaigns, I am a cleric who's kind of an asshole. Surprise! And he doesn't like healing. He is upset that healing is his thing, so he drinks and brothels his way through, like the bardiest cleric to have clericed. But the one time the party has seen him get very, very serious is when they found the ruins of a child's toy in a destroyed town. They don't really know why that would affect him so harshly, but because I know what's in his backstory, I'm playing that character, I wrote that character, I know that that's going to trigger something very, very different from his usual personality, and I let that show on the table. I didn't say why it affected him. If someone had asked me, we might have talked about it. Again, talk to each other at the table and stuff too. But no one asked me about it, so I wasn't going to offer it. I was just going to use how I was role-playing that character to kind of illustrate that there was some sort of shift there. Maybe it'll come up again, maybe it won't. But that was one of those moments that I got to kind of stretch a little bit in my character and actually flex that backstory without someone, without me walking and going, hey guys, I'm a cleric that has a troubled past, and so I whore and drink my way through things. Like, that's not how those interactions should go.
Yeah, I agree. There's power in secrecy, and I think that even I don't know all my players' backstory.
That was a question I actually wrote down. I have I'm so cool. I have notes, by the way.
I don't. I have water.
He has years of experience. I have notes, and literally one of my questions is, can you keep secrets in your backstory from the DM? Can you keep secrets in your backstory from the DM?
Yes and no. So it depends on what the secrets are. So if the secret affects external, let's see here, because if you think about it, the DM is kind of like the god, right? He controls everything.
He hates knows that comparison. Oh.
Yeah. I don't have a problem with my players keeping secrets from me as long as it's something that doesn't affect someone else. It could,
or the world.
Or the world, right. If it's a secret where it's like, whenever I see a goblin, I immediately need to kill them because they killed my family. That's something I need to know, because that's going to affect goblins and your attitude towards them, your disposition.
I'm going to throw goblins everywhere.
Yeah, whereas a secret, like, I don't know, when I was first starting my training in the temple, I stole a gold a day from the charity box. That doesn't really I mean, it's something that you can know, and you can keep that, and you can bring that up at some point, but it's not important information for the DM to know to mold a story around.
Right. I will say, though, in that specific case, of course, you did give one that I have a question on. All of a sudden, I'm getting the hankering that I want to be someone who stole my whole life and stole gold a day for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Now, all of a sudden, I've got 700 or 800 gold
Right.
just in my inventory. That would not be explained. If all of a sudden I was going to a store to make a purchase and I was like, yeah, I'll drop 500 gold, you'd be like, where did you get that gold?
Right. It's not a secret that you can be actively doing at the table.
But going into it,
Right. So
for example.
once again, if it affects the game, exterior includes gold because you are spending that with NPCs. That would be a conversation with the DM where it's, hey, I want in my backstory to have been stealing a gold a day or silver a day.
These are great ideas. You start with money. Yes?
And I would allow you to have a higher starting gold.
Okay. So that's one of my questions answered.
Yeah.
And that actually leads into something else I kind of was wondering about, which in general is, it's a two-part. It's how much can a player work with and ask you as they're building a character, and I'm saying you, but also in general DM, like how appropriate is it for you to tell the DM, like, I've got all these ideas, I'm not really sure kind of where to go. Do you have any, like how much give do you want a player to come into a story with
Right.
versus rigidity? And tying into that, two-parter, how much effect can they have on the world
Prior to the campaign starting.
prior to the campaign starting?
Sure.
Because I have heard you talk about this before.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, especially if you're doing a custom campaign, and even if you're not doing a custom campaign, because a lot of players, especially new players, don't know the lore of specific worlds.
Oh, you mean the lore that's like, this is just an introductory manual?
Yeah. That's one manual
One of
the
many.
8 we have. So, and for instance, in our specific one, right, our specific campaign, the lore is different than a standard whitewashed D&D campaign. So I would encourage a lot of back and forth between the DM and the player about their backstory and their history, because they don't know. I prefer not to give you your backstory. I would say, give me an outline and I can fill in the blanks, essentially.
Okay.
So we have a lot of people who say, I want to build here's a good example. One of our players is a water genasi, and water genasi are extremely rare. So, and he's like, I want to be from this area. And there is lore that I created in the world where that wouldn't make sense. So I would just say, as a water genasi, super rare, you would actually probably be from this region because it's more magical. It's surrounded by water. It's a more appropriate place for your origin. And then I can expand further. Give him a little bit of history of that area, so it gives him ammunition in order to finish his backstory out. There are also some people who just say, I don't know where to start. And
that's not a bad thing. There's no, I will say, there are tons of rule books. There's a lot of pieces, and we can talk about some of that stuff too. But in general, it's okay to not know what you're doing. I would say the general community, at least that we've played with and been lucky enough to play with, are very open to new players trying to figure it out. And that's a big part of it, is that community feeling. Don't be afraid to ask a stupid question. Even during a session, we encourage talking in accents and stuff like that, and voices, and giving your character a voice, because that way it's very clear to everyone around the table. When you say something out loud and you're asking a question, that's affecting the story. Whereas I might drop my accent and go, hey, DM, what spell, do I have this in my background? Do I know this area because I'm from XYZ region?
Yep.
And I'm clearly breaking that character and going to talk to him. So I think that that's kind of a good way to do that.
yeah, absolutely.
Always ask.
Always ask. Always ask. there's a certain amount. You know, I would never ask my players to do an accent. It's not necessary. It adds flavor, sure, and it does help, you know, create a separation between player and character. However, there is certain as a DM, you need to be watching the whole thing. So I should be looking out for when that separation occurs,
Sure.
whether you have a accent or not.
Sure. But, you know, the accents are fun.
They are fun.
And the voices.
And I like to do them too.
And when I one time in the middle, like I'd been playing a character for a while and then realized it helped me as a player to stay more in the session and in the moment, because there's a big thing. It's easy, let's say during combat, when someone, you know, there's a couple new players that maybe they're spellcasters, it just takes a little bit longer to get their turn lined up, or there's just a lot of moving parts. So there's some dead space for the player. The DM is always on. The player technically has some dead space. But the way that you make the session the most valuable is by staying engaged the entire time. And so I found that giving myself an accent or a voice or whatever it is that helped me embody the character helped kind of keep me focused and reminded me, even when I was talking, was I having a side conversation that really didn't need to happen right now? Was I talking to the DM, or was I talking at the table and I needed them to answer those questions or talk back in there as a character? And so I tried to do an accent like 3 sessions in and couldn't find it and kept coming out with a different one. It was a disaster. So, you know, feel free to experiment. It's not required, but it is, I think, as a new player, although it can be intimidating to go into a group of people and just like throw a voice on the table, even putting in any amount of differentiation that you might have for you as a player, I think is important, helping you stay in the session, because other people are playing their turns when you're not playing your turn, for example, or they're having an interaction that's important to them, or the characters that are involved with that. So it's the polite etiquette thing to do to let them have those moments.
Right.
I'm guilty of that, though. So.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's
This is a
guilty of it at
self-reminder.
some point. Because especially when if we have a full table, there's 6 people here, everyone has something to say, generally at the same time.
And we're not shy.
Right. So I got to kind of keep the peace at some point and get everyone back on track. And, you know, that's something that I wish I didn't have to do. But I know as a DM, and all DMs experience it, you know, you have to get everyone back on track multiple times per session, because
Herding cats.
conversations deviate. They generally start talking about that specific topic, and then someone might crack a joke out of character, and then 3 different side conversations start.
But etiquette is a conversation for another day.
Right. Yeah.
The other thing that I thought was kind of cool for character building, I have yet to try this, but I really, really want to. I've kind of made it my mission for my next full campaign to take advantage of this idea. But you can craft your character by yourself. For example, my reluctant mercenary style cleric healer. Why the heck would he risk his life in a dangerous adventure, right? Well, what's the motivation there? So I had to really think about that. It would make more sense, maybe, especially if I know the other players in the game, for me to reach out to one of them and go, hey, you know what makes sense for my character? If someone were to hire him as their personal healing bodyguard throughout this campaign, it gives my character a reason to be there that makes sense for how he is built. He's the selfish character, so it's a selfish reason he's getting paid to be there. And not just that backstory piece that pulls him in, but it also allows him some unique styles of healing. If there are 3 people down in a field, obviously his priority is always going to be whether it's least convenient, whether it means someone might die. His priority is always going to be going to that person who hired him. And so by going into a campaign with a pair, maybe it's a couple that's married, maybe it's a brother sister, maybe it's best friend adventures or whatever. It could be a trio, but going into a campaign with a pre-existing bond is something I really haven't played with yet. But I think it would be an interesting way to kind of tackle a campaign and give it a little bit of a different day-to-day action flavor.
Yeah, I love the flavor that all my players bring because a lot of them do stick to it.
Oh yeah.
And it's really nice to have that kind of consistency through such a chaotic campaign because it is very chaotic.
And we're talking about there's a campaign that we're doing right now that is a series of one-shots because it is aimed at getting the opportunity to play for a lot of people who haven't played before, haven't played in a long time, don't have the time to commit to a big campaign. And so it's like this one universe where we kind of jump in and out of one-shot adventures. And so in this one universe, we've had like 12 players, 13 players, something like that come through. And they're all radically different. And it's a very different feel to each session based on who we have there.
And it is funny because there is sometimes where anecdotally some of the characters will mention the characters that aren't at the table.
Oh, yeah.
And
yeah.
the new characters will be like, I don't
You're
know who
just
that
looking
is.
at you,
Dareth. We're still waiting for Big Giant to come back.
Yes, we miss our big friendly giant.
He'll be here next week. Yeah, no, I love it when players lean into their backstories and really let that affect the small decisions that they make.
Yeah, I mean, a good thought about that, again, kind of the story, the role-playing and the character building, you know, I am reading bits and pieces of this big old bad boy right here because I've never actually read the rules, even after playing this long, and we've talked about that. You know, there could be two characters that kind of start in the same place. For example, there could be this, you know, this one references two street urchins who grow up. And one has a history where she grows as a barmaid. It makes her, in general, a more charismatic person. She can blend into the background a little bit more because she's used to kind of fading back in as people tell her things. She's good at getting information out of people. Whereas another guy, the other street urchin that she grew up with, started learning sleight of hand tricks because that's the best way that he found he could survive. So those are two people who kind of have the same theoretical upbringing, but two very different backstories that lead to two different character builds that lead to two different types of decisions when they come across the same thing.
Yeah, one might lean into sleight of hand proficiencies while the other one leads into like deception or persuasion. Yeah, that's great, and I'm excited for our next campaign where some of these pre-existing relationships are going to mold the abilities and behaviors towards other characters.
Well, and I think he's also excited for me to read the rule book because I haven't bothered to do it yet. I'm working on it.
You haven't. Here's the thing: you haven't read the rule book, but you've been playing for over 10 sessions.
Yeah.
And you haven't read the rule book.
Yeah, I haven't read the book. And I think that's a good point. We might talk about this at some point, but this seems like a good time. There's a common debate in this household that we have had before about what the best way is to introduce a new person to this game. This is not a Super Smash Bros. Where you can hand someone a controller and they can button mash their way through it. This is not, you know, Monopoly where you draw cards and everything's written out for you and that's the fate that happens when you land on that space or whatever else it is. This is an extremely, I would say intimidating open world style game. You have to craft a character from scratch that still fits in the paradigms of the world and still makes sense for what's happening, but is also unique to you, someone you want to play, and someone that you stay consistent with. I think one of my biggest issues right now in one of the campaigns, that not my slutty cleric, I can play him perfect. I know exactly what he's going to do. My pirate captain is, I kind of based her off of Jack Sparrow, where he's, you know, the lovable ruffian with a heart of gold who makes bad decisions, but they're actually kind of for the right reasons. But like if you were to ask, that's not why he's doing it. He's a selfish pirate with a heart of gold. So like it makes it kind of complicated because sometimes I'll make a decision and I'm like, you know, I don't totally know if that is truly what Captain Vi would do in that situation. It made sense to keep the narrative moving forward. And I think that's one of those things that the more you dive into your backstory and the more you invest in figuring it out, the more true to your character you can play, which is going to, I think, better enhance everyone's experience. You're not just playing the game to win.
Right.
You're playing the game. And so on that note, the rule book is equally daunting and vast. And I was lucky that I had a really good DM. Actually, it was it Brian that did that session?
Yes.
Well, he did one of the sessions.
He did one, yeah.
Yeah, so I did one session with one of his best friends who's a great DM and has like really good outlines for his stories. And then he did a session with me and a couple other people. So I had two very different kind of one shots to get started with. And both times going into it, Tyler recommended I at least read the like 25-page dive into it rule book.
The starter guide.
Starter guide. I didn't want to read 25 pages of rules to try to play the game. I was like, oh, I'll see how I feel when I get into it. Because the thing with D&D is it's an investment, right? So, I mean, you want to know you like it before, to me, you want to know you like it before you invest in 25 pages of reading.
Right.
However.
Yeah. Well, so, you know, we did have this conversation a few weeks ago. And, you know, my point of view was that you should at least read the starter guide. Now, it's obviously not necessary because you've been so successful in the campaigns.
I don't pick spellcasters.
Talk about that later. But just tell me, in the last couple hours where you have been reading the rule book.
Oh, yes. I did my homework for the session right before the session. Classic college.
You've found a lot of
yeah.
interesting things that you wouldn't have thought about.
Like, okay, so we're gonna do this little segment each time where he assigns me a very short section that he thinks I should know as a player, and then I provide my feedback upon reading that section. So I'm just gonna skip to that part because this seems like a great time to do it.
Okay.
So I have, like I said, I've really never read the rule book, and the section he assigned me was about coinage and wealth. And I'm like, dude, coins are coins. Like, whoa, you know, a gold, 10 silver, a silver, 10 copper. Got it. And it's one of those things that at every session I've been at, everyone's got ample amounts of gold. Like, I've never played, because a lot of the campaigns are kind of built that way. And the only time it wasn't, my cleric was wealthy based on some background stuff that he had going on. Backstory, it's your friend. I never really had to worry about money. That's never something I've worried about in the game. But that is a real thing. And so I was reading some of the stuff here, and it's kind of weird to think about, you know, a gold piece, which we pass around like candy, okay? It's super uncommon. You know, you've got a silver is, you know, the prevalent coin amongst commoners. A silver piece buys a laborer's work for half a day, for example. And that's half a day's wages. Is one silver piece, theoretically, if you're like a somewhat skilled, like, you know, worker.
And I think it might say it in here, I don't remember, but there's a point where it says, you know, your commoner may never see a platinum piece in their entire life.
Yep, it does say that. They will never see, yep. And in fact, if you have some of these platinum, I did not know platinum and electrums existed. I don't think
we don't talk about electrum.
I don't think they're necessary. Like, I would rather just have 5 silver pieces than an electrum. No, why does that exist?
Yeah, I've never used electrum in my campaigns.
However, they do say that if you have some of those rare, weird coins, it automatically makes you suspicious to outsiders, which I never would have thought of. Like, if someone had given me a cool, weird coin, I would probably try to go trade it somewhere, and then all of a sudden suspicion would be thrown on me. But also, if you have all this gold, like we have, like one of my campaigns, I think I have hundreds and hundreds of gold. Why am I not buying my way through some of these interactions? If a gold piece is something that a bartender rarely sees, it's not like I need to throw 50 gold at him. Like, I could flip him 2 coins.
Yep.
And that might lower my DC when I'm asking him questions. DM, would that do that?
There is a line you must walk when you are bribing the NPCs.
What is that line? For the crowd who might want to start bribing people.
Right. I will not let you bribe your way through my campaign.
I'm a bribe through part for information?
No, you can absolutely do that. But there is, you know, and sometimes they say everyone has their price. And that is somewhat true. However, a bartender, no matter how much gold you give him, is not going to know the secret layer or where the secret layer is.
No, that's fair. It has to be in context.
So, or, you know, in the campaign I was playing last night, I willy-nilly gave 200 gold to a door guard to let me into this place that I wasn't allowed into. Willy-nilly.
Willy-nilly.
Stop it. Because first off, I was lying to him, and I told him I needed to get in for a reason that was not true.
Your villainous character lie.
And it was for the good of the party.
The greater good.
And they just say, all right, give me 200 gold and I'll let you in. And my dumbass didn't insight check them, which I should have.
We'll talk about checks another time.
I just gave them the money. We walked in, and we are currently in a desolate, empty, illusory maze now. That was not the building I was in previously. So I'm not really sure how that
will go. Stay tuned.
But I'm pissed because I'm out 200 gold, and when I come back, I'm kicking their ass.
Yeah. And that's a completely fair reaction in the universe. Oh, but let me finish my homework.
Okay.
2 more small nuggets while we're in the gold. See what I did there with the gold? Okay. One, magic items. We all crave them like candy, and a lot of us have them, or some form of it. And it says here, selling magic items is problematic, right? Never ever would have thought that selling a magic item would be an issue. I'm like, if I'm willing to sell a magical item, I can't imagine why someone wouldn't want it. And there's a whole host of reasons in here I won't even dive into, ranging from they don't know what to do with it, they don't know how to do with it, they don't know where to sell it or who to sell it to. So it's an issue for them that they don't want to take. And I never, like in my head, I've had a very valuable magical item. I've even considered this for a couple of the items that I have. Be like, let's just sell it to the next place. Like I wouldn't have even imagined an interaction would go with that. I just tell the DM like I do when I want to buy a potion or something. I want to sell this, and then I would find it out then.
You try to sell like a +2 sword of wounding, and the shopkeep's like, I don't have 10,000 gold. And what the hell am I gonna do with this sword of wounding? Like
wound customers who don't pay?
They're not a level 7 adventurer. They're a shopkeep.
And that's such a weird distinction to think about too. I mean, we're adventurers and we all have lots of gold and do all these exciting things and have cool gear and look weird. And in our party in the Crimson Gauntlet, we have, furbolgs and cats and
a lot of beast
water
races,
genasi,
which is really
and
funny.
Big things and tiny people, little halflings and dwarves. And so, keep that in mind when you walk into an establishment. Maybe, and this comment may be pointed at someone, don't bang the bar door open from the secret closet you've been teleported into. Maybe don't do that, because all of a sudden this well-weaponed, decked out, strange group emerges from nowhere, and there is no amount of charisma in the world that can get us out of that situation. Just saying. Yep. The other cool thing that I saw in here was trading goods. Even though I'm familiar with medieval times and trading, I never would have thought about trading goods in D&D, because part of it that they're saying is when you sell something, it loses value, just like anything else you sell. That makes sense. You might sell it at half value is all you might be able to get. When you trade goods, they retain their value, because you're trading something that someone wants specifically for something that you want. So it's easier to see why that retains value. And that's not something I would have thought about. But now that I know that, I'm gonna build that into my campaign. So that is today's homework. You're welcome. I'm reading this book, so you don't have to, but you should. It's fun. It's cool. Also,
Did you just say reading the rule book is fun?
I mean, finding out information that will rock your DM world.
I have it on video now.
I mean, it's context,
okay.
Backstory.
Reading the rule book is fun. It's my favorite thing to do.
While you're mocking me, this might be a good time for you to let loose on any DM issues.
Boy. Sure. Let's talk about.
You can call it whatever you want. You don't have to steal from Family Guy.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I know that's what we wrote down. I was gonna say what fails my saves.
Oh, there you go. That's cute. Look at you.
Yeah,
cute.
I'm clever as shit.
Oh God, don't rub it in too tight.
A couple. Well, I guess I don't want to expand too much on what pisses me off as a DM,
And that's
when
not
I say pisses
pointed
me
at
off.
anybody.
Yeah,
It's just little things over years of playing that you are like, don't do that. No.
Right. I think what's relevant right now, and especially in this campaign that we're playing, because I did create a world and countries and populations. When a character is creating a backstory and they want to change the lore of my world,
that is a no.
there
He's very proud of this world.
I am proud of it. It took me a long
maps.
time. I made
Did it from
maps.
scratch.
And there are exceptions. You can, for instance, I allowed you to build your hometown, build your profession, build all that stuff. However, if your backstory doesn't make logical sense, for instance, we have 2 bodies of land that no one would have been at or have been to. And you say your motivation for being on this adventure is because you got a piece of mail that says come to this island. That doesn't make sense because no one goes there, and why would you get mail from that?
And especially in that case too, that island is specifically like a big mystery. Like everyone who goes there never returns.
And I, in the original literature that I wrote for the campaign, and when I originally sent it out to everyone, and when I sent it out to everyone, we only had like 4, 5, 6 people that were playing. So that might have been the original people that read it. Everyone after that fact would have to like dig through our Facebook group to find all the old literature. And I try my best to explain how the world works in our campaign. So I'm not faulting any of the newer players for trying to change the lore because they didn't know what it was. And to their credit, when I said that doesn't make sense, they rolled with it and they changed what they said. In previous campaigns, I have had a lot of issues where players just refuse to. They're like, no, this is my character. That if that's not how it goes, I don't want to play this character, and I'll have to roll someone else.
You got any specific examples that are burning on the tongue there? I mean, I know of them, but I'm just gonna kind of go them a little bit.
Poke the bear. So.
He's gonna remember this next session.
Yeah.
Oh God.
I'm not going to say anything about anything current.
No.
I can't.
And there's nothing in the current ones. I'm specifically thinking of one person or one story you've told me. But the guy who, with the alignment issues. He wouldn't play the way that his alignment worked.
Oh, yeah. That one.
Yeah.
I wasn't a DM in that one, No, I was a DM in that one.
To be fair.
I wasn't. Yeah. Okay. Thanks for bringing that up because I
the
forgot
poking.
about it. Yeah.
That story.
We had a paladin who, paladins are warriors for their god.
Obviously, we all know this like so well.
They are 9 times out of 10, unless you are a Oathbreaker paladin, you're lawful and generally good.
Which is harder to play than you think, to be honest.
Right, because
your natural inclination is to do what's fun versus what is right. Anyway.
Yep, and using sleight of hand is fun.
So fun.
This paladin, there was a specific instance where it was a party of 3 people walking through a forest. Random encounter happens. Bear shows up, and instead of doing nothing or being defensive, which would have been probably the correct thing for a paladin to do, his first reaction was inflict wounds, a 3rd level necrotic spell that not
That's
only
bad.
one-shot the bear but just macerated him. So, and
this was no mercy kill.
yeah, inflict wounds is not a fun spell for the recipient. So, and credit to my other players, they brought it up and they said, why would you do that? He was just a bear. He wasn't threatening. He wasn't coming right for us, And the session continued on, and after the session, I talked to the individual and I said, you know, that's not something a lawful good paladin who you know worships this god would do. And he just kind of said, well, that's how he is. That's not how he is.
That's wrong.
That's not a paladin. Then you should have built a different backstory. You know, he could have been a paladin for an evil god, and that would make more sense. But being a paladin of a neutral or a true or a good god, and utterly destroying a neutral beast doesn't make sense. And I said, well, you can do, you know, we have a couple of options here because I want you to keep playing. You're a good player, and we don't want this particular event to destroy the party. I said, you can either just have a change of heart, become a good paladin, continue on your path.
Pretty simple.
You can deviate from your path, and we can turn you into an Oathbreaker paladin.
Also pretty simple.
Or we could narratively, if you want to play a different character, kill you off secretly and then have you roll a new character. And that's eventually what it came down to. And guess what? He still plays that character to this day.
Oh, there you go.
So
But that's why the backstory stuff, I kind of realized this was all linked to backstory. That's kind of where that backstory stuff comes into play. And if you don't know, I mean, when I picked a cleric, I was like, what happened is they needed a healer for the group. And in this particular group, no one really wanted to be the healer. And I was like, you know, I don't really know what I'm doing. That sounds easier than being like the guy who goes in guns blazing and or swords blazing. And so I was like, yeah, healer makes sense. Did not realize until like a week maybe before the session that clerics have gods and it's a religion thing and I have to learn what my religion is. So I had to go through a bunch of gods. And the thing is, when you're doing something like that and you want to play that character, like he said, there are so many avenues for you to go through. You can, you know, my goddess, the one that my character worships and praises, you know, whatever to, is like the goddess of wine and luxury. And he's secretly in love with her, which is why he's kind of a man whore, because he wants the woman he can never have, which is a goddess that's impossible. But it makes sense for him to worship a goddess of luxury and then be kind of a lazy guy in pursuit of luxury. Like that works for that particular character.
Yep.
But there is a god for kind of everything you're looking for.
Right.
So if you do play something like that, pick the right god.
Yeah. And don't be afraid to ask your DM to create a god.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
So
Oh.
I
didn't know I could do that.
Yeah. Pantheons are, you know, they exist and they have generally what 95% of players would use as a god. But if you have something very specific, yeah, absolutely. A DM could create, it wouldn't be that
DM.
difficult. It would be create a gender or genderless, alignment, and what is, you know, a patron and what is their belief.
Mm-hmm.
So at the end of the day, ask the DM.
Ask the DM.
Don't
That's
forget
a good
to ask
point.
questions.
Let me see if there's anything. But yeah, I guess the backstory part of it was kind of the biggest thing we wanted to get into today, knowing that race and class and a lot of other things kind of derive from it. I mean, right here, I know I'm going back to the player's manual. He's getting secret glee out of how much I'm enjoying reading this player's manual.
this.
Shh, you. But
good.
literally, it starts the entire, like, chapter 1, before you dive into the below, which is building your character. Think about the kind of adventure you want to play. You might be a courageous fighter, a skulking rogue, a fervent cleric, or a flamboyant wizard. Or you might be interested in unconventional characters, such as a brawny rogue who likes hand-to-hand combat, or a sharpshooter who picks off enemies from afar. And it kind of goes on into that. But I think the biggest takeaway from this is kind of the way that I look at it, which is, what is your role within the group? Maybe, you know, do you want to coordinate some of that? But ultimately, how do you want to play? If you want to play as a Tyrion style, you know, noble dwarf who seeks out hoes, and that's kind of his thing.
Seeks out.
Seeks out the hoes.
I am Tyrion, hoe seeker.
Yes. Then have that in mind and build your character to fit that, because at the end of the day, it should be about what's the most fun for you to play. And fun can be defined as what's a challenge you've never done before, or just what's a character that you think is outrageous and ridiculous and you really want to do it. The key point is it has to be grounded in the story and the universe that's around it. But there's so much to it. I mean, you can kind of do anything you really want to if you do it the right way. And your DM, especially if he's fabulous, can help you.
Yeah. With the current campaign, since we have so many people, and we have, unfortunately, I think the last person that can joining next week.
We're locked.
Yeah. We do use a specific tool that I won't name because they're not paying me to. That only allows me to share my content with 12 people or 12 characters.
Yep.
But he asked me, he said, is there anything that the party is missing? And that's a real difficult question because, yes, there is.
We get a lot of rogues.
We have several rogues. We have several fighters. We have several clerics.
We do have several clerics. Yeah.
Well, we have two.
We have two.
And they are two of the most constant players, which is nice.
Which is super nice.
Same thing with we generally have at least one fighter. You know, generally have at least one rogue.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't like having what the party consists of dictate what my new players choose. Because if I have a new player that has something in their head, they're like, this would be really fun, I don't want to deter them from that.
I mean, that's good of you to do. Here's where I'm going to disagree for just a minute. I think that that's important. I mean, you want someone new to the game, especially to enjoy the experience that they're going to have. So build a character they want. But I would say as a new person, that very first full campaign we did, we were going through a Tomb of Annihilation. Oh my God. Great for that new player, huh? A couple of us. But it's one of those things that I really didn't know where to start and what to do. And it's helpful sometimes, for a one-shot campaign where people are in and out, there's a lot more flexibility about what character you play. But when you're in a long-term committed relationship with the rest of your, the rest of the adventurers, it's necessary to have a healer. It's necessary to have a tank. It's a good idea to probably have someone who can do some lock picking and maze sorting and lying and other things like that. So I ended up asking the rest of the party, who are you? They were the experienced veterans. They knew what they wanted to play. Let them do that, and I will fill in whatever role is left over. Side note, spellcasting is hard, and prepping spells is hard. So maybe if you're brand spanking new,
either spend some time understanding how spellcasters work, or pick a hybrid spellcaster.
Yeah, the cleric is a lot better, and I have a giant wine glass spiritual weapon, which makes me really happy. Oh no, I made it the master hand from Super Smash Bros.
Right.
So I literally can say bitch slap, so it'll,
Yeah,
Anyway.
and you're right, especially in our one shot campaign. It's not as important to have a good composite set of characters. I still will not tell you I will never say you should be a rogue. Mm-hmm. If it comes down to that for our next campaign, where we are going to have a specific set of people that will constantly be at the table, I will give the guidance. Should have someone who's roguelike, a fighter-like, a cleric-like, a ranger-like,
and even
and
without
talk about
those,
that with each other.
You might say, you should probably have people who can heal you. That can be a druid, a cleric, there's, different classes that can fit the roles that you need at the table. You need someone who can take some hits. You need someone who can deal a lot of damage. You need someone who can help heal people, that kind of thing. And I think you're saying for that campaign, we're going to have a session 0 and, build our characters together at the table.
I
which
highly
I'm super
recommend.
excited. I've never done that.
I highly recommend Session 0. This is, for those of you who don't know what a Session 0, I think every campaign should start with the Session 0. Session 0 is a little bit of backstory about how the world works. Mm-hmm. For instance, our new campaign will be set in Eberron, which is very different than Faerun, which is very different than the Crimson Gauntlet campaign that we're playing now.
I know all these names.
So, so there will be, part of it will just be me talking about how the world kind of works. once you have that information, you can start to build your character, because then you go, oh, if we're in Sharn in Eberron, which is a city that's got multiple crime syndicates, that's going to influence your background.
Right.
Am I part of one of these crime syndicates? Am I a son of a man whose father got, or son of someone who, got in trouble with one of these crime syndicates, and am I seeking revenge on them?
Or you owe them a debt, so you have to
Right.
work for them whether or not you're actually a villainous person.
So this session 0, in addition to the story, I don't want to say story building, but the explanation of how the world works, is a good point for players to ask questions about races and classes. Because if they said, I've never played
Tabaxi.
let's say I've never played a drow, a dark elf before, and I think they're really cool, and I really want to play one. Something I might say is, well, did you know that if they're in direct sunlight, they have disadvantage on all attack rolls?
No. Oh, that sucks.
Right? So
That sucks.
If you didn't know that, that would be a severe disadvantage. Same thing with kobolds, right?
Ah.
Yeah, because they are primarily underground dwelling characters.
Okay.
In that new campaign, I will be able to restrict certain content so that won't even be available to the players.
Right.
But the great part about session 0 is also when they go, I want to be a wizard, ritual casting wizard. Have you ever played a wizard before? Well, no, but it looks really fun. I was like, okay, well, we're going to have a long conversation, because another thing that really fails my
your
saves is it's two-part. One, when the players don't either prepare their spells.
Unless they didn't know that they had spells, because that happened.
Right.
And that was on you, because you
That was
helped
me.
him.
Yeah.
He made a mistake.
DM's human.
I thought he was good.
If you don't prepare spells, and if you don't read the spell before you use it, I'm not expecting my players to memorize all their spells. What I am expecting...
That's what the tool we do not mention.
Yeah. What I am expecting is if you have a certain cantrip that you know you can use all the time, like a firebolt, you should know that a firebolt does 1d10 damage, because that's just what it is. So you roll for your spell attack. If it hits, you roll for your damage. I don't want it to get to your turn and say, what are you planning on doing? And at that point, you start looking through your spell list, because that's going to slow the whole combat down. It's going to, create opportunities for the other characters to
Get distracted, which we talked about earlier.
And break, and some people get up and leave the table.
And
for
we'll
something,
do a whole session, talking about spellcasters. We'll talk about combat, stuff like that. I am going to be timekeeper. It's about time for us, so kind of the best way to wrap this up, of course, is hope you guys got some really great information to think about when you're building characters for your next campaign, or how the build of your characters affects the playing and those kinds of things. And we definitely want to hear from you guys on questions that you have, topics you'd like to hear about, anything. Can you hear our dog chewing on his toy in the background?
Yeah.
Weird little stick.
We know there's an echo in this room. I'm going to try to see what I can do about maybe some soundproofing or sound.
Any
editing.
excuse to do more stuff.
Any excuse for projects. We're going to be upgrading our mic sets and our audio sets, so this is very temporary as far as this
It'll
goes. And absolutely go to our Facebook page, like our Facebook page, follow. Please post suggestions for not just questions about topics, but maybe suggestions on the format or layout of.
Yeah.
If you're looking for a new section, say I'm particularly interested in something that may not be a common, because we're going to try and go over common topics.
And we'll do some deep dives and stuff like that too.
Right.
And I did want to also call out that we support Extra Life, which is a charity that gives 100% of the proceeds to a local children's charity. Our website, a local children's hospital. Our website, which will go live this week. That's where we'll be hosting all the episodes after they're live. We'll have, there's the wine. We'll have a link in there on one of our pages that you can support Extra Life directly. We love them, and we think that you guys would love them too.
Yep.
Thanks.
We are starting a Patreon. 90% of all the funds donated through the Patreon go to Extra Life. The remaining 10% goes to us in order to upkeep the stream, pay off all of the equipment, and
Soundproofing projects.
soundproofing
apparently.
projects, getting the stream better quality. Once we've hit a certain threshold for the month that we feel is comfortable for stream maintenance, we will donate 100% of Patreon funds or to Extra Life. But keep an eye out for the website going live
This week. Not gonna put a day on it. Sorry.
These podcasts will be hosted on in high definition on the website, and we are going to Solo.
He's been good for a long time.
He's the timekeeper. He's like, it's been an hour,
He's like,
guys.
"It's an hour."
You're done. Yeah. The podcast will be hosted on our website. And we are also going to see what we can do about Spotify and all those other podcast places.
We're gonna do that too.
Well, of course, it's a podcast.
I don't really think about the phone. But thank you guys so much. We're going over, but thank you. Have a great Monday.
And
from your team at The More You Roll.
We will be back next Monday, the 9th at 8 p.m. Central Time for episode 2.
Bye.
Bye.